4 ways that the LEGO Movie raised the bar for animation that led directly to the Spider-Verse movies. First of all, you have to understand that at that time, animated movies pretty much all looked the same. They were all animated on ones and every movie looked photorealistic. So in the early 2010s, when the LEGO Movie started its animation production, they wanted to do something a little bit different. Instead of taking inspiration from other animated movies at that time, the filmmakers chose to take inspiration from the LEGO community itself. For the longest time, the LEGO community was making animated stop-motion films called brick films, myself included. I used Bionicle instead of LEGO, but it counts, come on. The filmmakers did this because they wanted to explore the theme of creativity and anyone being able to build Legos. So because of that, they wanted to create a new animation style for CG animated movies that referenced some of the animated movies that came out of the community through the brick films. Because the animators wanted to use a different animation style, the next 3 things that the LEGO Movie did directly related to things that were prevalent in the Spider-Verse movies. See if you can spot the similarities. So the creative team had to ask themselves, how do you create a new style for an animated movie that doesn't exactly look like a Pixar movie? The LEGO Movie was one of the first CG animated movies that asked the question, what else can we do in animation besides photorealism? Because the filmmakers were going for a look that was similar to the brick films, they wanted to use techniques that were akin to stop motion animation. For example, there is no motion blur in the entire movie. If there is blur between 2 frames, they utilize a technique called smear frames. And the way they're doing that is they're actually creating Lego pieces that act as a blur between where the character was in frame 1 and where the character ends up in frame 2. When it's all played in motion, it feels really seamless. They also put in things like fingerprints on the characters as well as the seams where the molds would be on the actual Lego pieces. This was all for stylizing the film to look like a stop-motion animated movie. The Lego Movie utilizes a technique called animating on 2s, which means you have 1 new pose every 2 frames. The use of animating on 2s and smear frames is something that I talked about in my other video about Spider-Verse, but a lot of these CG animation techniques were popularized by the Lego Movie. Not only did the Lego Movie directly influence the animation renaissance that you're seeing now, but it also utilized some story techniques that I think are really underrated. These are ones that we see later in things like Spider-Verse. When you're trying to create a character and you want them to be sympathetic, a lot of times a technique in storytelling is to have the character continue to make mistakes or to fall on their back in almost every scene. This is something that the Lego Movie uses a lot, where the character of Emmett is actually a bumbling protagonist, but in the end, because he continues to fail, we keep rooting for him to get back up. And this is something that's seen in Spider-Verse directly, where the characters are telling Miles to get back up. And so by the end of the movie, when you have him coming out of the portal and he has all of the master builder techniques, we're really rooting for him. And that can be seen as a direct correlation to Into the Spider-Verse's scene where Miles jumps off the building and is swinging for the first time as Spider-Man. Interestingly enough, this is a storytelling technique that is also seen in Spider-Man 2. This storytelling technique is great because it allows the audience to sympathize with the protagonist and for us to really root for this character. A lot of times the character is really resourceful in the way that they get back up. For example, when Emmett puts the wheel on top of his head when they're driving away from the enemies in the Wild West world. It's a similar technique to Miles Morales just grabbing the entire computer at the Alchemex lab. The reason I'm highlighting these storytelling techniques is because both the Lego Movie and Spider-Verse introduced a character to the audience that they were unfamiliar with at the beginning of the story. Emmett is your generic Lego minifigure, and coming into this movie, the audiences were wondering, why should we even watch a Lego movie in the first place? Similar with the Spider-Verse movies, where you have Miles Morales, a brand new character to the movie-going audience, they're asking themselves, why should we watch a movie about Spider-Man when we have 6 other movies about the same character? My back! These storytelling techniques are actually a really smart way to introduce your audience to a new protagonist so that by the end of the movie, you're rooting for them to succeed. It's really encouraging for children and adults to be watching stories like this, because at that point, they really do see themselves in the character. The final way that the Lego Movie influenced animation is honestly the most impressive one. When the Lego Movie was finally released, it was met with universal acclaim and ended up getting a nomination and winning Best Animated Feature at the Oscars that year. Just kidding, it wasn't even nominated. So how does a movie that didn't even get nominated for an Oscar end up influencing an entire generation of animated movies? It directly changed how the audience perceived 3D animated movies. Pretty much everybody loved the Lego Movie when it came out, but it wasn't until years later that its impact was really felt by the industry. If you didn't know by now, the directors of the Lego Movie, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, were actually the producers for the Spider-Verse movies. Because of how they directed the Lego Movie to look like something that wasn't a Pixar film, they ended up taking this animation experience over to Sony for their Spider-Verse movies. But I really think this falls in line with the theme from the Lego Movie. The Lego Movie became a training ground for new animation techniques that ended up being used years later in other animated films. Look, here's the beautiful thing about the Lego Movie. The team behind the Lego Movie used their creativity and imagination to discover new animation techniques for 3D animation. Instead of following the instructions like other 3D animated movies, the team decided to use their own techniques. And even though the movie was knocked down by the Academy when it came to nominating it for an Oscar, it had already persuaded audiences to give this new style of 3D animation a shot, so that by the time the techniques were utilized in Spider-Verse, the audiences were rooting for it. Ultimately, and this is the beautiful part, these are the exact themes that are explored in the Lego Movie. The Lego Movie is a celebration of imagination.
imagination. And that's what animation is all about. The Lego movie really did walk so that the animation renaissance we're seeing now could fly. And sometimes you get really wholesome full circle moments like the 14-year-old who animated for Spider-Verse in the style of the Lego movie. Like seriously, isn't that awesome? There's also plenty of other animated films that were directly inspired by these animation techniques, like The Bad Guys. I actually got to work on The Bad Guys and I'm making a video about it now, so if you want to hear me answer questions about it, please ask them in the comments and I'll try to answer as many as I can. Also, if you like hearing me talk about animation, I'm making my own animation for VR that you can watch the launch video for that here. If you like this video, please show it by hitting the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. I really appreciate everyone who subscribed to me. It's been really humbling and I really appreciate it, so thank you. Until next time, thanks for watching.